Welcome everyone, those in the room here and joining us online. So we'll be together for a couple of hours and we're going to do an energy transfer in that process. So Barb's going to tell you a little bit about herself and why she's here and how our whole journey began, and then we'll continue with our conversation in a minute.
All right. Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Barb Morey, and it's always such an interesting story because you've always heard of synchronicity, and you never know when something is going to happen, and it all started out with a day that I wanted to go to a gas station and get gas. But there was, let's vacuum the floor and do this and do that. And all of a sudden this voice says, stop everything and go to the gas station right now. So I went to the gas station and there was a car just like mine. I had a PT Cruiser, it was tan one. But it had a trailer hitch on the back. And then the voice said, if you don't talk to the person in that car, you're going to regret it the rest of your life. So long story short, I talked to the person in the car. Now, I'm not a person that go to knock on people's door at gas stations. I don't do that. But I did. And long story short, they took me to a raw food potluck. And the first thing I said was, it's not raw meat, is it? And they said, no, it's fruit and vegetables and nuts. And they make them creative. Well, everybody there was so happy. And I'm thinking, I don't care how good the food is, you're not supposed to be that happy. So I kind of looked around, and they showed me the food and then they explained each piece of food and how they made it and what was in it. And I was thinking, I'll try this and that, but I'm not trying that one. It's just, how it is. Some things you appeal and some don't. But I just looked around and then I saw him. And I said, oh, who's that? And I was told who he was, and I said, okay. And I said, well, I got to talk to him. Well, why do you got to talk to him? I said, just have to, So then I walked over to him, and I told him, I said, you have the largest aura I have ever seen. And he did, and he still does. I said, and I quite you, and I couldn't think of any other spiritual master but Gandhi. I've seen a few others, but that's the only one that stuck in my mind. I said, like Gandhi. I saw only Gandhi's, his aura is like miles. This isn't quite that big. It's big, but it's not quite that big. So anyway, so that's when I got in trouble. Everybody in there wanted me to read their auras, and I did a New Year's, bringing in the New Year's, where everybody got a reading from me in the raw food potluck. It was fun, I was just kind of having a good time and really didn't think too much about anything, I was just chilling out, having fun, I like to have fun. So then he had me come over to his house. And he was testing me. And I didn't know he was testing me. He was saying, I want to show you the picture of these different gurus. So he's sliding through them all, and it seemed like some were the same, but after a while they all look alike. But I was consistent with the colors of each one, and if I seen it again, I was still, consistent. So then he believed me because he's although he's a yellow, he's got this blue in him, which is, he needs everything to be proven. He's just not going to take your word for it. But I passed. So then we decided to do these events, and we started over, and for him it was an experiment. We started over in the Troy Library, and a lot of good things happened. Some people stopped taking their medication because they were healed. It wasn't his intent to do that, but you don't have any control over people's beliefs or what can happen, so you never know what can happen. And, we did that for quite a while, but then Troy Library said, we think you're too weird for us, bye. And so we tried the Rochester Library, and that didn't last very long. But this place right here is a really good venue. They like us, and they don't care how weird we are. I personally never cared how weird anyone thought I was, because I've always been just who I am. Well, so that's how we started this. Now I've always seen auras my whole life. I actually didn't know that I called it glowing. And I thought everybody saw people glow. Because I was raised as an only child till I was 6 years old. And it's like when you turn on a light, the light comes on. And then you turn the light switch off, it goes off. Are you going to tell anybody that? Of course not. So why would I think, oh, they're glowing in different colors? Why would I talk to anybody about that? Because I figure, oh, everybody sees this stuff. And, it wasn't anything for me to talk about. And I began to think that there was something odd when I was at work at the post office, and one of my coworkers came running up to me. His name was Joe. And I said, Joe, what's wrong? And I knew there was something wrong, and he wouldn't talk to me. And, I was sorting magazines. We called them flats. I was breaking them down as I worked in the box section. And you don't want to run from one side of the box section to the other. With mail, you want to go in each section to put it in. I thought, ooh, he's not glowing. I think he's in trouble. So I went hunting to the post office to find him because I want to know what's going on. I went to the men's bathroom. He went in the men's bathroom and died. So I thought, ooh, if you're not glowing, you're going to die. So I thought, oh. So after that, every time I went on an airplane, and I went on quite often, I wanted to see the pilot and co-pilot because if they were glowing, I'm not going to that plane. Well, interestingly enough, knowing this about the glowing thing, but still didn't know about auras, we were on an airplane. We were going from Vegas to Detroit, and the plane dropped like 500 feet. I would whoosh, So everybody started screaming and crying and everything. And I kind of looked around at everybody. I said, "Oh, you're all glowing. We're going to be fine. They'll land us in Detroit. We'll be. Everything's cool." Everybody quieted down. And I'm thinking, wow, they think I'm a voice of authority, but they're all glowing, so I know they're okay. One of my other coworkers, he was walking out with me, and this was before 911. Okay, so this is a long time ago, and he walked out and he had a heart attack and went on the floor. So I looked at him. I said, "Anyone know CPR? We can save him." So we had a fire station 2 doors down. This is the middle of the night. I dashed out the side door and ran to there, and I'm pounding on the door. And the guy, he comes in and he goes, "We don't answer that door. We only answer phone. Ring." I said, "That's the phone. It's the post office. 2 doors down. Heart attack. Please get there. Save my coworker." And they did. And then they gave him oxygen and everything, and he was fine. But then he wanted to go back to work. I said, "Are you kidding me? You had a heart attack. You better go to the hospital and get yourself checked out." So anyway, that's when I began to think, but yet I still wasn't really understanding that, my glowing was an aura. So, you know how it is. We all have, especially women, but men too, we all have our stuff, the stuff that we want to deal with. So I went to a feminist therapist because I didn't want to, no offense to the men, but I wanted to go to a woman. I thought maybe she'd help me understand some of the stuff that I was going through. Well, one of the times I was at her, there was a bulletin board over there. And on the bulletin board, it was it looked like a mouse, and it was just jumping around upside down and wiggling, and so I started laughing because it was funny, I mean, I didn't expect something to do that. And so she says, "What are you laughing at?" And I said, "Well, there was something jumping around on your bulletin board." And then it gets a little weird. She said she dreamed she was in the land of two, and she divided herself in half so she could understand people. And she was just thinking about what she was going to put on the bulletin board. So then, of course, I'm paying for the session. So I got upset. I said, "So you're more interested in the bulletin board than you are me, So I said, "That's not fair. I'm paying you for the session. Don't worry about the bulletin board until later." So anyway, she said, "Do you know what that's called?" To pacify me, I says, "I have the faintest idea." And so she told me that was her aura. And I'm, aura, okay. Wow, I never heard that word before. So then we used to have this newspaper, it was called Phenomenews. And so they had all these interesting different workshops and stuff. So I thought, well, I picked up one and I'm looking for, let me see if I can find this aura stuff, because it's really not, there really isn't any place to find out about that stuff, and especially back then, So this would be probably in the 80s, So I looked, and there was this woman her name was Barbara Bowers, and she was from California. And she was coming out to do a workshop. And I thought, oh, cool. So I went to the workshop, and believe it or not, if I'm uncomfortable, I turn into a turtle. I sit back and I peek my head out, so I sat in the back row, and I'm just kind of like, ooh, And then I finally relaxed, and she said, you finally relaxed. You're a yellow with an red overlay, and you see them too. Get up here. So she dragged me up front, and then she said, what color do you see? And she was telling me, I was telling her the colors, and she was telling me what they were mean. Well, another thing that you don't know about me, or some of you do and some of you don't, that I have been a sign language interpreter, not certified, because the deafs, by the deaf's wishes, they didn't want me to become certified. Because back then, in the 70s, when you're certified, you just tell them the words. But if they don't understand it, that's not your problem. But I wouldn't do that. I made sure that the deaf people understood every single thing that the other person was saying, and their attitude. If they had a lousy attitude, but they're like two faces, they're saying one thing, but their attitude is different, I would make sure that the deaf understood clearly, what their actions were, so they were satisfied. So anyway, part of that is when you have a conversation with somebody, and like you're talking to you, and you don't know each other, you don't know how to communicate, but I know your language and your language, because they're two different ones. You share it, but that's your conversation. It's not my conversation. That's between you two. So I learned that, whatever you guys said after I was done, interpreting, I forgot it. So then I started putting that into the aura reading. And I thought, oh, it's almost like when I know all these people and their colors, now that I understand what it means, I learned that I felt a little bit, gee, this is like, peeking in a little bit of their soul, So, and I know I'm weird and I'm odd, but, I can't help it. So I learned to kind of turn it down a little bit, and, so that, everyone wasn't flashing and going so much, and I could just, give everyone their own privacy until they actually ask me. And then when they ask me, then I go tell them what I see. But if I'm in a group, I'll keep it pretty general. But if I'm one-on-one, then I'll be more frank. I mean, they may or may not like it, but, so that's kind of who I am. And, I really try to live that golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. But I don't expect them to do it unto me. I don't care. They can do whatever they want, but I'm going to do it because it satisfies my soul. So, and, so some of the things that I've done here was, I've done a couple workshops where I'm on YouTube. I talked about my auras and core colors. And then I showed how to create an energy circle using rocks and crystals, which, is in my workshop that's probably about sold out already on our expo. But, I just think it's good to have people have that opportunity to learn and do things. And I love teaching, and I love sharing, and I love helping, and it's just, I've been doing that my whole life, and at the post office, when they taught by humiliation, which I had no use for, I went to the postmaster and I asked him, let me learn everything, and I'll take over the training program. I'm just this little sub, but I took over that training program, and people went way up the ladders, because I treated them with respect. That's all you can do. You treat people with respect. You don't make them feel like a ant or, squash them. You want to encourage people. And that's always what I've always done my whole life, is help and encourage. And I so love this place. I mean, I feel like it's the family I've been looking for. I love Flower of Life. I love Ethann. I love Michaela. I love the other light workers. I love helping them. It's just my heart and soul. After everything else, I've had so much in my life, and I've lost so many people. But now I've got my family, and I just, I just love it here, and I just love that you came, and I love you guys on Facebook land, and I think you need to talk, so.
Well, that's a first. Well, thank you all for coming, and
We love you too, Barb.
Thank you.
well, thank you all for coming, and so we'll be here for a couple of hours total, and we'll be doing an energy transfer in that time period as well. Barb's usually the one who makes everyone laugh, not get emotional, but she's in rare form today. Anyway, so how many of you are completely brand new to this? Okay, a couple of you. And if you're online as well, you can participate as if you're here in person. So we are live streaming this event on Facebook, and so I'm looking at my phone to see if there are any questions. There was a question earlier about Barb's Aura class that she did recently. That will be put out on YouTube if you weren't able to attend recently. Probably, we're a little bit behind on everything because the expo is coming up next month, and we just had our kids program last couple weeks ago. But probably in the next month or two, we'll put that out on YouTube. So let me just talk a bit about the organization, and then we'll talk about the energy transfer. The purpose of you being here today, whether you are sure of why you came here or not, is to raise your consciousness and to sort of help you on your journey and make it a little bit easier for you on that path. And I'll talk a bit more about what that means in a few minutes. But we do have the Awaken Empowered Expo coming up in a month, August 9th through 11th, and we do it every year, usually around the fall. Next year we've got a plan for November already as well. If you're interested in volunteering for that, after this is over, we do have a volunteer meeting here. You do have to attend at least one volunteer meeting to be a volunteer at the expo, just so we can go over the different roles and so on. But this is our 7th event that we're doing, and it's sort of like a bigger manifestation of what we're doing here. So we have the Flower of Life Institute, where we primarily, the Flower of Life Institute is sort of an umbrella organization that encompasses all the other moving parts. So the expo is part of that, and Awaken Empowered TV, which we put out a lot of these events on YouTube, and as well as our expo events that are also recorded and also put out on YouTube. So Awaken Empowered TV, you can just search on YouTube and you can find years worth of content that we've had, as well as a lot of guests we've interviewed that I've interviewed on the show as well. And we have a magazine as well, and a kids program that is started out as a conscious youth program, which was a local physical event we did for kids to help gifted kids and also kids who want to learn to develop their spiritual gifts, or who may be having challenges being in modern society and being very hypersensitive. So we did that for many years. Now it's an online program where we do classes about every 2 weeks, and kids all over the world join and meet other kids, and we bring in teachers like Barb and Michaela and others to teach them things like channeling and crystals and animal communication and things like that. So we have that as an ongoing program, which is free for kids. So if you have any kids 9 to 18 who may want to join, you can just go to consciousyouth.org and sign them up for that. We have our Weekend in Wizardry, which we just did it 2 weeks ago, and that's once a year. it's a day camp where parents and kids flying in from all over the country, and I think from Canada as well. And we have 3 days where we have classes for workshops for parents, but we also have workshops for kids, and we teach them hands-on. So Barb and Michaela are two of the teachers there. We taught them animal communication and a variety of different energy healing, things like that. So hands-on with teachers that we bring in to teach them those kind of subjects. Now, as Michaela mentioned earlier during her session, this is our long-term, what we're doing now is just the beginning of a long-term plan to move toward the next step with Conscious Youth, and our kids program is to launch a year-round online education platform. So for parents who want to homeschool their kids, and who are finding that mainstream education isn't really suitable for them. We're going to bring a lot of these subjects, but also mainstream subjects like archaeology and history, but a more modernized version of those things, because a lot of our education system is watered down, or it's preconditioned to teach kids just certain things, but not really the truth of what's actually happening out there. Because we have access to a lot of teachers on the leading edge of these fields, we're going to bring those teachers into our online education platform to teach them live. So what's actually happening in the field of archaeology, and what's really, and things like channeling and meditation and those kind of things. So that will be, it'll probably take us a year or two to launch that, but we'll be starting to develop that in the next, after the expo's over this year, so that kids can learn from all over the world and have an all-day long, week-long education program to replace existing education programs. Because we're finding that that's a need now, and especially a lot of mainstream schools are requiring vaccinations and things like that that many of us don't necessarily agree with. So this is a way for parents to have another resource to help kids who are a bit more advanced and more spiritually aware and sensitive to be able to learn from a lot of very talented teachers around the world. And teachers won't just be adults, but we will have some children teachers there too, who are a bit more developed. I mean, there are a lot of really amazing kids now who are quite talented and knowledgeable in certain areas, or have advanced intuitive abilities, who may also be some of the teachers in these programs. So that's our next step for that, and ultimately we will launch physical schools for kids around the world. So that's a bit long term, but anyway, we have many things going on. The expo is next month, and it's a more intensified version of what we do here. So the purpose of this program, what we're going to do in the next couple of hours, is to help you to raise your consciousness, your vibration, and to remove any density that is, or that you're ready to release today, which will help you to move forward on your journey, in your soul's journey in this life, without as many obstacles that you may have experienced. So we'll be doing that. Now the expo is a high vibrational experience, much like what you'll experience here, but at a higher level of intensity, because first of all, we do energy transfers every morning of the expo. And then in addition to that, we have a lot of very high vibrational healers and teachers there. We handpick our presenters so that their consciousness is at a certain level. Like, for example, Barb will look at the auras of all of our presenters. So while we have access to a world of very knowledgeable people, we only select a certain kind of person to speak in front of our audience. Because our expo is not necessarily about the knowledge, although there's certainly a lot you can learn there. It's really more about helping individuals to transform on a very fundamental consciousness level. So when you leave there at the end of the weekend, you will be a different kind of person. You'll be experiencing your reality in a different way. So the majority of people who come to our events, the most common thing I hear is that it changed their life. And that's what we're trying to do as an expo. So that'll be 3 days this August in downtown Detroit at the Doubletree Hilton. So join us if you'd like, or volunteer if you're interested in that as well. So what we're going to do here today is to elevate your consciousness, as I said earlier. And I'm not really going to get in depth into my story. Barb already shared a bit of our origins and how this began. We started this organization back in the latter part of 2011 and early 2012. And I think I met Barb around end of 2011. And so the organization started as Flower of Life. We called it Flower of Life Center back then. Now we've launched it as Flower of Life Institute. And the purpose being to help usher in this awakening of consciousness that's meant to take place at this time in the world. And all of what we see in the world is pointing to that. Many ancient prophecies point to this as being the time when there would be a great awakening, or a period of peace on earth, or heaven on earth, or a period of higher consciousness and enlightenment. Now, if you're living in the world today and you're paying attention to mainstream, you probably don't think that that's even possible because it seems like there's a lot of insanity going on in the world. And certainly that is true, but whenever you come to any sort of period of change in the world, there is that period of chaos that occurs in between. One of the speakers we have at the expo this year is Mandara Cromwell. She's the founder of I believe the International Cymatics Institute or something like that. I forget the name of it. But anyway, they're an organization that's focused on the science of sound and studying the science of sound. And a lot of the archaeology or the archaeological research that's coming forward now is pointing to the possibility that that many of these ancient structures were built using some sort of vibration or sound. So if you follow conventional archaeology, their belief is that thousands of slaves pulled these gigantic blocks over logs and somehow carried them up to build these pyramids, and which is really not even realistic. Or, of course, some theories are elephants did this. But some of these stones are so huge, it's not even realistic for elephants to lift these things. So somehow these ancient structures and pyramids were built using some sort of technology that we don't know what they had. And there are certain, some theories are it could have been some sort of spacecraft, and certainly there is some possibility of that in ancient India. There are a lot of stories of vimanas, which were UFO-like spacecraft that could have been used for that. And in some places, there is the writings about how some sort of sound technology was used to shape these stones and to lift them. So certainly those are possibilities of how these structures could have been built in ancient times. We are at this time where a lot of new understanding is coming about in the world about our ancient civilizations, and every day there's more and more being found out in the world about ancient civilizations and new cities that are becoming unearthed, or even some that are popping up out of the ocean that have been submerged for thousands or tens of thousands of years. So we're in this period of time that may in some way appear as if the world is not going in the right direction, but on the other hand, there are huge revelations coming forward all the time, not only in ancient knowledge, but also in new things that are coming into society. But as I was saying earlier, the science of sound, or cymatics as it's called, is there are some YouTube videos that you can find where they show how when a particular sound is passed through sand, it creates a certain kind of Mandela shape. And when the sound is elevated to a higher frequency, that Mandela shape changes in complexity to a more complex structure. So as you move from lower vibration to higher vibration, the complexity of the shape of the sand increases. But what's interesting is there is a period, just a split second, between when the Mandela or the sound is at a lower frequency to when it moves to the higher one, where the sand goes into chaos, where it loses its shape and breaks apart, and then it reshapes as this more complex shape. That's kind of where we are now. And that's why you're seeing this world where there's chaos and there's war and there's suffering, and then at the same time there is this movement toward higher consciousness and greater knowledge and wisdom and greater sense of inner peace. Well, at a certain point, that shift is going to happen fully. And when that occurs, we will then be in this more complex, higher vibrational state. And when that occurs, we will be in a much better society. So for the time being, we're in this in-between place where both are coexisting, and because of that, they're clashing with each other. But on the positive side, not only is ancient knowledge and wisdom coming into being, but even today, the move toward healthier lifestyle, or people are becoming more vegetarian or vegan or things like that. Not that those are necessary for your higher consciousness, but but it's just a sign that we're moving in a certain direction toward a higher consciousness. And at the same time, we're seeing a change in the financial system and a breaking apart of the old system. Many banks, many major central banks are having problems, or a lot of mainstream banks are on the verge of collapse. But at the same time, we're moving toward a more decentralized financial system as well, which I know many of us who are more spiritually minded don't even like the idea of money or banking or anything like that. But we have to transition from here to there, because in the third dimension, which we're still in, and we're moving toward this fourth dimensional space, we still have to have a linear timeline. So in this material reality, we have to deal with time. And as a result, we aren't going to instantaneously move from the existing system to a system where there is no need for money or anything like that. So instead, we're going to move from the existing controlled system of finance to a system that is not controlled, or a system that's controlled by everybody. And that's what we're now starting to see in the world with the movement toward cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and things like that. So if you're unfamiliar with that, you may want to look into that a bit. But Bitcoin, as an example, is one cryptocurrency that was not started by banks, and it's not owned by anybody. It's not controlled by any governmental system. It's actually controlled by the people. And that's really a first in our entire recorded history. Now, maybe in ancient times, they had something in their own way back then. But in our entire recorded history, we've never had a decentralized financial system that is not controlled by a government or a bank. So that's a move towards something positive, which means that we have a more fair and equal system that's coming into being. Now, it's going to take a little while for that to happen, but it is a move that is happening. And in the next couple of years, in a couple of years, the planet Pluto will move into Aquarius and will remain there till the mid-2040s, which is going to usher in this really huge revolution of consciousness, and also revolution in all areas of society, technological innovations, health innovations, and so on. Meaning, a lot of the limitations that we've perceived in our reality will not become limitations in that world that we're moving into. Meaning, we're seeing kids who are telekinetic and telepathic these days, and even a lot of adults are starting to develop those abilities, but certainly kids are coming in with those abilities already. So as we move into the next 20, 30 years, that's going to become more and more normal, which is why we exist and why we're doing what we're doing, is to sort of help usher that in and to support individuals, both children and adults, to move into that world. But we're also going to see innovations in technology, like in the next 12 to 24 months, there are going to be self-driving cars on the road. They're already out there now, but they're not fully self-driving. But in a couple of years, that'll be the norm, And we are also moving to a decentralized economic system. For example, services like Uber and Lyft and Airbnb are services provided by individuals instead of services provided by corporations. Now, they're still sort of corporate, but what will happen in the next few years is they will also become decentralized. Meaning, if I want to have a ride somewhere, I can contact somebody, they'll pick me up, drop me off, and there won't be any centralized company like Uber behind it. It'll just be two people interacting with each other. But even to the next step, as cars become autonomous, there won't even be people necessarily behind it. It'll just be technology providing services for people. So we are moving toward a more freer society where people will be healthier, live longer, and won't need as much money to live. And many other things. At the expo this year, I'm going to talk a little bit about that change in the economic system and how we're moving toward a system where people won't really need very much money, and a lot of that money can be earned passively without really doing much. So in the next 20 to 30 years, more and more people are going to move to a passive way of living where it won't be necessary for you to go to work and put in X number of hours to get paid in order to pay your bills and live. There will be a lot of tools and resources and things provided for us so that we can live passively and live more abundantly without having to work in a field we don't really like in order to earn money just to pay the bills, just to have a life. A lot of that is going to be coming into being. It's already starting. Not to mention, some companies and countries are starting to think about the idea of offering some sort of universal basic income where people will have a basic income without having to work. And then if you want to work, you can. So many interesting things are coming into being. And as we move into this age of Aquarius over the next 20, 30 years, we are going to see a move in a very revolutionary period of our life and our journey here as human beings. So what we're here to do today is to help those of you who are ready to take that leap forward a little bit sooner. Regardless, one way or another, the Earth is moving toward a higher consciousness. We don't have a choice in that if we choose to be here as physical human beings. As the Earth moves to that, we are all going to move with that. So even people who are very conventional and mainstream are going to still move into that world. The difference is that those who are very much rooted in more dense third-dimensional energies are going to struggle through that journey because they're not wanting to let go of that. And this process is going to help you to move a little quicker on that journey, to remove some of that density that's preventing you from moving forward, and also to elevate your consciousness and give you access to a higher awareness that will make that a little easier. Now, what that looks like will vary from person to person. Each of you are unique in your level of consciousness and your current level of development, and each of you has a different amount of density in your energy field. Now, density can come from even being in a negative environment or a more dense environment. Not negative in a positive or negative way or good or bad way, but negative meaning lower vibration versus higher vibration. So let's say you work in an environment, you go to your career, your job place, and it's a very dense place with a lot of very people who are suffering and struggling, or you may even live with somebody who's that way. And if you are in that space and you're embodying a negative emotion while being there, you can be lowering your vibration and consciousness and taking on more density. And that density will slow down your progress. Another thing could be if you have a really poor diet, can lower your consciousness and increase your density. And to some extent, there is a lower vibrational consciousness that has been to some degree managing the Earth's consciousness for quite a long time and has kept our consciousness very low. This is why we have wars and we have suffering and limitation, and why people perceive, although we're all from Source and we're all connected to Source, but why do people suffer? Why do people feel like there's lack? Why do people feel like they have to go to work doing something they hate in order to make money to barely get by? People suffer because there is this lower consciousness vibration that has been influencing our journey up to this point. But that's in the process of changing, and that's why we're here, and that's why a lot of the other spiritual teachers and movements around the world are happening. And that's what we're going to do today, is to help you move along that journey a little bit quicker so that you can progress faster. The reason is because many of you are here to be way showers in that future world. As the mainstream starts to awaken and starts to move forward on their journey, they need teachers and leaders and guides to help them. And many of you who are here in this room are here to help to usher that in. And that's why you're wanting to do this at a little bit earlier stage than most. And that's why we started doing what we were doing too. And now in my work, other than oversee the organization and all of its moving parts, I also work with a lot of light workers to help them to develop their gifts and to get out into the world and to do meaningful things and help with this awakening of consciousness. And what I'm seeing is a lot of the people I work with these days are from mainstream fields. So while you may think that this is only us in this room and those of us who are into spiritual things and who meditate and who are into channeling and things like that are a little bit out there for the mainstream, that's not exactly true. I talk to people who are in fields like business and finance and people who are medical doctors and nurses and marketing professionals and from all different backgrounds who you'd be surprised are having spiritual awakenings, finding themselves in this world with no family and no place to go because they suddenly don't belong where they were. And they find organizations like this to help guide them in the direction that they need to go. So this is happening on a very large scale. It's already happening, and just because you haven't heard about it doesn't mean it's not. It's just that a lot of people who, imagine if you're a medical doctor and working in a conventional field, and your awareness starts to shift, and you become aware of this other level of reality. Well, you can't exactly share that with the other doctors and nurses in your environment, right? Not all of them are at that same point. So many of these people are keeping it close to the vest. They're not communicating it. Although I hear that even in a lot of medical conferences now, they are talking about energy healing and things of that nature, which you'd be very, or light therapies or things like that. And even a lot of medical doctors are bringing ideas like light therapy and energy healing into their practices. So it's an interesting time that we're in, and all of the things that we, those of us who've been part of this conversation for a long time, have hoped to see in the world are really happening. It's just that they're happening behind the scenes and people aren't really talking about it yet. But in the next 20 years, these ideas will become more mainstream. Even the idea of us moving toward a financial means of exchange. Now here we're in the United States, we have people joining online all over the world, but the US dollar is the world reserve currency. We have that power and influence in the world that we can dictate the financial means of the world. And we can, as a government anyway, I'm not saying we don't have any power in that sense, but as a government, we can dictate which countries fall and which countries thrive. And that's been a power that's been in the hands of governments and a small handful of people until now. But this is the first time we've had a global currency that governments can't control and that they cannot dictate what other countries do or not do. So we are moving in this direction where those powers are being taken away from the handful of people who have abused it in the past. Now, I'm not saying that the world should be a leaderless world where we only have people controlling everything and that there is no use for people who are leaders or who are leading the different movements. But the problem with our society at this point is that the leaders who govern the world don't possess the consciousness level to be able to lead in the most appropriate way. When we move into a world where the idea of free will, when a person's own needs align with their desire to help others or to serve the world, is when we'll have leaders that are doing the most appropriate thing for everyone. But unfortunately right now, when a person, most people, and this is not just in government, but because we're still in a very three-dimensional, more egocentric society, when a person moves into a position of leadership, they're thinking about their own needs and their own desires. And so they get into power and they want to have more power or more money or more something, but they're not considering the repercussions on those who are in their care. But when we move into a world where a person's own needs match the needs of the people who they're serving, will be a much more enlightened society. So I'm not saying that we're not going to have leaders all of a sudden in the future, but the difference is that leaders will serve themselves while serving others at the same time. It's kind of like, if you look at it as, for example, what we're doing here. What we're doing here, what Barb's doing, what I'm doing, what Michaela's doing, and other people around us, we're serving ourselves by being here because we're following our own path, our own mission, our own desires. We're also providing for ourselves in the different avenues that we're doing these things. But by doing this, we're also serving all of you. So by us living to what is our own desire, we are also serving your desire. And the world doesn't work that way yet, but this is the early sign of what we're heading toward. Imagine if we had a government where the leaders actually lived for their own desire, but their own desires were in alignment with the people who they were serving. That's the more ideal world, and that's the world that we're heading toward. It's going to take a little time, but a lot of these little things, these little signs that we're seeing are a sign that we're heading in that direction. So today, we're going to help you on that journey. Now, what that means for you, and the most common thing that we hear from people who come to these events is that they feel a greater sense of joy and happiness, which is just a natural side effect of higher consciousness and less density in your energy field. But many people have a lot of other manifestations of this, which is some people do come into their spiritual gifts and abilities. When you remove the density and you raise an individual's consciousness, the obstacles that were there before to them living to their fullest potential of why they came here are not there as much. So each time you do this process, it sort of lifts that veil between you and your optimal self, who you came here to be. And in doing that, well, sometimes your spiritual gifts will start to show up. And sometimes you may have opportunities in your life that weren't there before. You'll have a greater sense of awareness of your reality that will be different from what you saw before. Some people, your relationships will change because when your vibration changes to this degree that we will change today, your current life and what it looks like, the people who are around you, your interests, your passions, and so on, and your understanding of your reality are all a manifestation of your current state of being, your current vibration, your current consciousness. When we change that to such a dramatic degree, you will suddenly gravitate toward a different reality. You may gravitate to different relationships. You may find that, like for example, I'll use a real example. If you're a medical doctor who has a spiritual awakening, well, you may find that suddenly you can't be a medical doctor anymore. And I hear this a lot. A lot of people that I work with are in the medical profession who have worked in a conventional way. They one day have a spiritual awakening and they cannot go back. I mean, they could, but in a way, like within themselves, they can't go back to their former life. Something similar happened to me back in 2010. I was living a very mainstream conventional life and working in a conventional field, had a spiritual awakening, and I was very successful in that life in mainstream sense of what success is, but I couldn't go back. So I walked away from all of that and instead chose this path, which for a while was not an easy path, but I couldn't go back. And many people are experiencing that. So one thing you should be conscious of, and we do get emails a lot of times from people around the world who participate in these events, either here in person or online on Facebook, or certainly you can use the YouTube videos from these events to facilitate the same process. But sometimes when a person goes through such a dramatic shift in energy or in consciousness and vibration, their life sometimes will collapse. And so you should be aware of that, and if that's not something you want, you should leave before we start. It doesn't happen in every case, but sometimes especially when somebody is brand new to this process and they have an immense amount of density in their energy field, going through a process like this will cause such a dramatic shift that the next day everything falls apart. And we do get those emails a lot. There's nothing we can do about it. I mean, it's if you sit through this process, that's just something that you are accepting as a possibility. But keep in mind that if that collapse occurs, it's a good thing because it means that you're moving toward a higher aspect of yourself. And that does happen quite often. Now, some people, their relationships break up. That is a common thing that happens around me, even if I'm not doing energy transfers. People who are on the team or a lot of the light workers who work with me, those shifts can occur. The point I'm trying to make is that your life will change in a dramatic way when your vibration is different, because your new vibration will attract to you a new life experience, complete with new people, new circumstances, new interests, new awareness. So this process is a way for you to accelerate that journey that may take you ordinarily lifetime or lifetimes to go through, but it can happen very quickly in this process. And repeat this as often as you find it beneficial, and if you don't find it beneficial, then don't repeat it. But each time will move you a little bit further along on your path. Anyone have any questions about anything? Are there any questions online?
Can you just address why someone would cry a lot when they do an energy transfer with you?
Mm-hmm. Well, so I use the word karmic density a lot when I describe. So you're going to all be sending your karmic density to me at a certain point. And to some degree, the process has already started. As soon as you enter the room, there is a consciousness that's present in this space, which I'll talk about briefly. But when we do the actual energy transfer, we'll increase the intensity a bit. And Barb is able to see the energy in the room. To a great extent, I wouldn't have started this without her, because her ability to see auras allowed me to be able to understand what was actually happening when we were doing this. And when we started this back in 2011 or 2012, it was purely as an experiment. As she said, we started at the public library here and as an experiment just to see what would happen, and she could actually see the energy moving around the space. So I use the word karmic density. So karma in Eastern philosophies is, now it depends on which spiritual teacher you speak to, but they all have slightly different perceptions of it. Some people believe karma is something that comes from a past life experience. So if you had a trauma in a past life, or in some beliefs it is if you do something bad in a past life, you carry that karma with you into this life and you have to answer for it. Other people believe that karma is slightly different variation of that. Now, when I use the word karmic density, I use it a little bit differently. So let's say, for example, in a past life you did experience a trauma, but it could also be in this life. Maybe as a child you had some sort of a trauma that occurred. And traumas a lot of times can manifest as vibrations in your energy field and as a dense energy that holds down your human experience. So let's say in a past life you had this trauma and you bring that vibration into this life, and it weighs down your human experience and it prevents you from living your life from a higher perspective. And a lot of people carry a lot of density in their energy field, and this is why one person may have money and the perfect relationship and everything you could possibly imagine, but they're suffering in life. And another person could be living on the streets and be in bliss all the time. It's because the density that a person is carrying can weigh down their human experience and can cause them to experience more suffering. So when we release that density, we remove that challenge or that limitation to us being able to experience life from a higher perspective. Now, to answer the question about why a person may cry, or in some cases people do actually laugh during energy transfers, that's also has happened over the years, is because sometimes the density is related to, as I said, a trauma or something that might have caused you grief in a past life. And when that density that's connected to that trauma is released, the emotion oftentimes goes with it. Now, you may not know where the emotion came from. You just suddenly cry. That a lot of people do cry during this process. But it is the release of that density, and what's replaced with it is this heightened state of consciousness and joy that's there, and that does often create emotions, or whether it's crying or laughing or something like that. So if you experience some sort of emotional release, it's okay. You don't need to know what it's from. It's usually connected to some density that was attached to it, and that's all that's really necessary to understand about it. So just to give you a little bit of my backstory so you understand the process, those of you who are brand new to this. So I started doing this intentionally when I met Barb, but as it turns out, and a lot of people came into my life right around the same time that are still a part of my life, like Michaela and Barb. And when I started doing this with Barb, I did it because I had this awareness that a lot of, I lived a very conventional mainstream life prior to 2011. Now, I always had a spiritual awareness, but I was working in the business and financial world most of my life. Even as a child, I was very entrepreneurial. But it wasn't until I started doing this work that I realized why a lot of unusual things that happened throughout my life, even from a child through adulthood, that my former left brain self couldn't really explain. So I just put a lot of experiences on the shelf, forgot about them, and it wasn't until certain people like Barb and Michaela came into my life that I started understanding why those things had happened. So Barb could see the auras and the energy moving in the space. Michaela, I've had a chance to channel with her and to understand why I'm here, why am I able to do this, and also, as it turns out, I was able to speak with this collective consciousness of beings who facilitate this process. So there is a 13th dimensional collective of beings, many ascended masters and extraterrestrial consciousnesses who facilitate this process that I call an energy transfer for all of you here today. And it works just as well if you're on a live stream on Facebook, and it will work in the recording of this event as well. So a lot of people, if you watch YouTube videos of our events that we've done, people all over the world, all throughout the day and night, are using the videos to facilitate the same process we're doing here today with the same kind of success that we're going to experience here. Now, the reason for that is because I'm not the one doing it. This 13th dimensional collective is not hampered by space and time. So here we have a linear timeline, and you have to be here physically with me to do this. But the 13th dimensional collective is not limited by time. So anybody who holds the intention can use a video from this event to facilitate this process at any time at their convenience, and I've given permission to do that. So my purpose here is that in order to do this, this 13th dimensional collective that facilitates this, they can't interact direct with the third dimension because their vibration is so high that they can't send this energy and facilitate this for physical human beings or physical environments without there being a physical anchor here in this dimension. So this body was prepared to be able to be a conduit between the third dimension and the 13th to allow them to do that. And at the same time, as a soul, I had to be prepared through spiritual development, through many incarnations, in order to allow for this so that there would be no harm for me in the process of doing this. So at a certain point, I will ask you to send your density to me in the room. And now, a lot of individuals, many of you who may be exposed to healing work and so on, we're very conscious of protecting yourself during healing sessions and such. I don't really need to do that. And so when you're sending your density to me, it doesn't affect me in any physical or psychological or spiritual way. The density that you're sending to me will no longer be in your energy field, but it will not be in mine either. And it will disintegrate as it hits my energy field. That's my role here, is to allow that collective to facilitate this for all of you so that you can accelerate your growth and move forward a little bit more quickly than what might take you lifetimes to achieve. And at the same time, they're going to be sending an energy from that 13th dimension to all of you to raise your consciousness and vibration. Barb can see both of these things happening, and what she sees is that everybody's aura doubles or triples or bigger than when they came in the room. And for those of you who've been coming month after month, either in person or remote, you can see your auras are larger than the room as you're walking in. So we know there's a cumulative effect that happens over time the more often you do this. And larger aura means, well, lots of things. Your health will improve with a larger aura. If you're sensitive to energy in your environment, it provides a little bit of a cushion or a buffer in your space. It will also, so if you're a healer, for example, it will help to make it easier for you to do healing work on other people without causing any effect to your own nervous system. But to a greater extent, though, as your consciousness expands, you will just have access to higher aspects of yourself than you did before. Is there a question online?
Yeah, there's two questions actually. Do you recommend energy transfers for children, and can we include them through our own?
Yes, there's no problem with children. This process, first of all, as I said, my purpose here was fulfilled when I was born into this reality. There was really nothing more for me to do at that point. And as Barb's looked at pictures of me as a child, and I'm a very skeptical person because I come from an intellectual mainstream background. So I put her through a lot of tests, as you said earlier, when I first met her, because I needed to validate whether or not she was for real and she was really seeing what she said she was seeing before I was willing to step out into this path, because it's a little far out, right, to be able to do this, and to, especially coming from the background that I come from, to be sitting up here and saying I'm going to do this was a big step for me. And now I had, throughout my life, my adult life, and even as a child, I had been told these things, that I would do these things, but I never really took it seriously. So when she came around and told me this, and I thought, well, if she's for real, then I have to investigate that, and because I don't want to be here and waste the opportunity that I was presented with, that I came here to fulfill. So I decided that I had to explore that. And so I did put her through a lot of tests in the beginning. And in the end, I had her look at pictures of me as a child, and she said my aura was the same as it is now. So, and then later on, I met Michaela, and she channeled for me. And what I was told was that I came into this life with this ability, and that my physical body and soul was prepared to do this, and that this 13th dimensional collective has been using this physical body all throughout my life without my conscious awareness, because I gave them permission to do so. So my role was fulfilled when I came here. And in environments that this physical body is in, it neutralizes the density in that space without me even having to necessarily do anything, because they're doing it. And that's, in hindsight, explains a lot of the unusual things that have happened throughout my life that I couldn't really explain. Now, so what we're doing here today is we're going to follow that process with intention. And what was the question? Did I miss the?
Yeah, can people include their children
Yes,
in the process?
Children, yes. So yes, you can include your children. You can just hold that intention for them, or you can have them participate. A lot of children have participated over the years, and that's perfectly fine. Now, the reason is because my role here in this 13th dimensional collective knows what every individual needs. I don't need to know who you are and what you're here to do or what level of consciousness you want to move to. They will adjust to your own needs and what you're here to do. So if there are children who are ready for this process and you include them, then they will also receive the benefits, including pets in your environment. We've had a lot of interesting stories about pets over the years where people who are participating have included their pets, or in some cases they haven't included their pets, but their pets nonetheless have changed or reacted to the energy without their knowledge. And we've a lot of emails over the years asking, will this affect pets because suddenly my dogs are acting differently or whatever. Yeah. What's the other question?
Why would people experience a change of temperature when you do the energy transfer?
Well, everybody's different. Now, years ago, it's not that uncommon for us in these circles anyway to believe that, for example, if somebody does a Reiki healing, sometimes their hands warm up, and we're pretty used to that sort of idea. But what I found over the years, though, is that it's not necessarily just warmth that occurs when energy is moved between two people. Every person is a little bit different. About 15 years ago, before I was on this journey, I had a friend who had some sort of serious health problem. I can't remember what it is now. But, back then I didn't really know I had any sort of ability like this, but I still had this awareness that something was there and I had to use it. So when situations like that came up, especially really serious situations, I nonetheless did something anyway, not really believing anything was going to happen, but unavoidably it did. So I had this person years ago, and I forget what was wrong with his health, but I put my hands on his arm, and his arm turned ice cold, which counterintuitive to what we would expect when somebody does a Reiki healing. Now, what I've found over the years, and whatever that issue was, went away for him. What I've found over the years is that it's not only warm temperature that occurs when energy is exchanged, sometimes it's cold. Some people get ice cold. And the reason is each of you are completely different beings, and your physical bodies are completely different. Even if you're identical twins, there are differences in your physiology. Each of you has a different emotional state, emotional conditioning. Each of you eats entirely different diets, which means now food isn't just food that provides, physical sustenance or energy for the body. Food contains information. So whatever you eat contains information. So if you eat an avocado versus beef, different information. And that information is also changing your physiology, your psychology, your emotional state. And then go to the next level, which is, well, we're all multidimensional beings too. Although there are physical bodies sitting in these chairs in front of me and joining online, each of you are multidimensional. Some of you may be more fifth dimensional, some of you may be 13th dimensional, some of you may be very third dimensional, but each of you are accessing different dimensions while you're sitting here in these physical bodies. So everybody's completely different. There are no two individuals on this planet who are exactly the same. And because of that, no two individuals react to energy exactly the same. Just like, some of you are allergic to nuts, so you can't eat nuts or you'll have a reaction. Somebody else can eat nuts till the cows come home and it has no effect on you. So in the same way, energy affects everybody differently, and your physiology responds to energy differently. Some people will turn ice cold, some people will turn really hot, some people will feel no temperature change at all, some people will cry, some people will laugh, others will enter states of bliss, others will notice nothing while they're sitting here. So everybody is going to have a different kind of visceral experience. Sometimes I'll just sit next to somebody who's energy sensitive and they'll feel the energy even though I'm not intending to do anything, because that consciousness is always operating through this physical structure. So everybody's response will vary, and some will have no physical response at all. So the main thing you're looking for is, over the next few days and weeks, do you feel lighter? You have a greater sense of happiness? Are the things in your life that trouble you normally not bothering you anymore? Because the main thing that separates any individual from an individual who's of a higher consciousness or a more enlightened being is not that the enlightened being has no troubles in his or her life. It's that the enlightened being isn't bothered by those troubles. That enlightened being is in a heightened state of joy and consciousness, and they can go through adversity or ease, and it's all the same. They still experience that joy in their human journey. So as you become more conscious and you have less density, you will find that you just experience more joy and more lightness in your life and less suffering. So that's ultimately the goal here, but many other side effects will come with that, such as you may find that you find what you're here to do, or you discover your life mission or passion that you didn't know was there that now suddenly comes to you. And this happens a lot. People come to our events, they'll suddenly start being able to see auras or have some other kind of ability pop up, or they'll have abilities that maybe they had as children but have gone dormant will reawaken in them. Some people, their physical health issues will change or go away and improve their health. Lots of different manifestations. As unique as your physical structures are from each other, your experience of this will vary. But ultimately, the more often you do it, your state of joy will increase. And that's, if that happens, that's all you really need. The rest is just icing on the cake. So let's do the energy transfer, and then we can continue the conversation afterward. Let me give you a little bit of prelude as to what to expect and how the process works. I typically play a little music in the background just to drown out the rattling and stuff in the room. And this music is by Mark Romero, and Mark is going to be joining us at the Expo this year again. He's a high vibrational musician. Barb's in love with him.
No, I'm not in love. I love him. I love his wife too.
Mark's kind of a fixture in the organization. Actually, he's one of the people who was there since the beginning too. But anyway, Mark has an interesting story too, because many of us who are stepping out onto these paths now come from mainstream backgrounds, and he is a former Silicon Valley CEO. Started a IT company in his garage, became a millionaire, and then walked away to play guitar. And so that's what he does today. Is he has become this high vibrational musician and high vibrational healer. And as it turns out, his music has this healing effect on individuals, and organizations like NASA have tested his music and found that it has a certain physiological effect. So I play that music in the background just to sort of support the process and drown out background noises and such. So we'll do that. But this is a two-part process, and Barb's going to be observing the room just to see how the energy is moving. She can actually see the energy moving between us, and she'll also be able to tell us what the room looks like before and after. So maybe you can tell us now before I forget.
Well, I mean, I do see some density in the room, and I think the people are ready to get rid of it. and energy levels are, some are higher, some are lower, and it's interesting how sometimes when people pick, when we were doing yours, or you were doing yours, there was an orange in that front seat, and she took off because I've never seen an orange here before. Yeah.
Yeah, I think orange is a new aura color.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this, didn't
Right,
we?
yeah.
Because it's been coming into my sessions a lot.
Yeah,
That
and
it's
she
new.
was orange, and I wanted to talk to her before she left, but oh well. Maybe she'll come back. Yeah, we got a couple new colors, and not only orange, but there's this. It's kind of a light blue, but it's really beautifully blue. And I've seen so many light workers, and I've even seen it myself. And I'm going, wow, I never saw that color before.
I'm seeing that too in session, like a light crystal blue.
Yeah, like a light crystal blue.
Yep.
So anyway, the energy in the room, I mean, it's your auras are all different, and the energy's up and down. So, but I do see some darkness in the room, and I'm just waiting for you to get it all cleaned up so I can say, well, So they're all anxious. Okay, let's get on with this. But I do want to tell you that when I have worked with the light workers, my cat has to get up on my lap, and she wants to see them and see them do it, because she likes that feeling of the different light workers. And I played I was on one of your energy transfers. I saw that you were on Facebook, so I jumped on there. My cat jumps right on there, and she's got her paws right up there and looking at yeah, that was cute. Okay.
Okay, so Barb will check out your energy fields afterward as well. Unfortunately, those of you who are online can't join us in that, but if you're coming to the expo, then you'll have the honor to be able to meet Mark Romero as well as Barb will be there, and so we'll be at the expo. We'll be performing the music that I'm playing here live with Mark there, and Barb will also be there to help us. So, but anyway, it was a two-part process, and so I want you to trust the process. Don't worry about me. This physical body is not affected by dense energies, and I have been tested over the years by dowsers and other people, and generally if I stand in a space where there's dense energy or electromagnetic fields, it neutralizes that space. So I'm not affected by density and dense energies. And in fact, at a certain point, we did a little experiment where Barb was there, and we were working on reducing the collective consciousness density, so the whole world as a collective consciousness. And so she was there, and she could see all this dark energy coming toward me, and she couldn't even see me in the room for a period of time because of the dark energy around me from all of the density in the collective consciousness. And but it didn't affect me in any which way. So you don't have to worry that any harm will come to me in the process. Just trust it and be willing to participate so that you can leave here a little bit lighter and a little bit farther on your journey. So the first part is you're going to be sending your density to me. Barb will be observing the room, and she'll stop me when she feels like you're fully cooked. And at the same time, I'll be sending this white light energy from my heart center, which is coming from this 13th dimensional collective, to all of your heart centers, including those of you who are joining online. And that is intended to raise your consciousness and vibration. And also, whenever you have any kind of energy from any dimension, but 13th dimension in particular, there is information in energy. Just like there's information in avocados or cows or whatever. So anything you eat contains information as well. So when we receive this energy from a 13th dimensional collective, it contains information, vibrational information, that you may not be able to make sense of right away. But what will happen is 2 days, 5 days, 6 months down the line, you may start seeing a reality differently and understand things that you didn't understand before, because your mind will start to interpret that information into things that you can use and into awarenesses of your reality that you didn't have before. So you may find that 6 months from now, your world looks very different to you than it does right now. And so part of the process of this energy coming through, it is a white light energy that will raise your consciousness and vibration, but will also convey a certain amount of knowledge and wisdom to you that you will need to use in your future. So we'll be doing this circular process of energy. You're sending your density to me, and I'm sending this white light to all of your heart centers, including those of you who are online. And then when we're done, we'll stop, and then we'll take a break and see how things are going, and touch in with Barb and see how everybody did. Anybody have any questions online either? We're good? Okay. All right.
No, people online just want to know if Barb can look at their auras on Facebook.
Yeah, everybody asks that question. Unfortunately, you're going to have to come to the expo or come to one of these events to have Barb look at your auras. And her workshop, I think, is sold out at the expo. She's a very popular gal. But if you come to the energy transfer, although at the expo there are 100-some people in the audience, so she can't exactly look at everybody one-on-one. But these events are more intimate, so come join us here in person in Michigan. We do these usually about once a month, and Barb's almost always here, and we'll be able to look at your auras during the process. So focus. Let's close your eyes and breathe comfortably. My eyes will be closed as well. Barb will be observing the room. And I want you to focus your intention on sending any density to me. And no harm will come to me in the process, so don't worry about that. And if you'd like, you can visualize that as a dark cloud of energy leaving your energy field and keep sending it to me. And if you're in the physical room, don't worry, that energy won't hit anybody else on the way to me. This 13th dimensional collective will pull it from you as long as you're willing to participate. And you're going to keep doing that all throughout. At the same time, I'll be sending a white light from my heart center to all of yours, and that will raise your consciousness, expand your aura, and so on. So I'm going to be silent now and play a little music, and I'll come back when we're done. you're ready.
I have to tell you, I sit next to him, and today, I mean, because I think you were reaching out in Facebook land, it was like there's a little motor, and it's just like going, and I'm feeling this as I've never felt it that strong as I have today. It's just, I mean, you are really kicking it out, and like you're one of the newest ones. Your aura just shot right up, and everybody's so much lighter in this room. I mean, it's like, I see a lot of lightness, but I mean, you are working it. I was feeling it. Even my whole body was going, which, is good. Sitting next to him, I'm surrounded by his aura because it's so huge, but it's always like these warm, arms. It's like a big hug all the time when you're next to him, it's really nice. And I don't think I've ever shared that, and when he sends his light out, I mean, it's just, it comes from here and it just kind of, it comes out and then it just divides, to each person. It just kind of like I see a little light hitting to every person, it just, and, he just sends it right out to your heart center, And then I'm watching, a lot of you people, you imagine this cloud just coming up at him and, just to get away from your negative. So I just see that just kind of wash over him, just kind of, it never gets any closer than this, it just kind of washes over. And when he was right when I was looking at that one time, because I was sitting away from him and it was like, I didn't see him, but where are you, Ethan? But I had put him in an energy circle that time when the very first time you did that. And then I knew he would be fine after that. I knew that he's amazing. He could do anything, And the lightness in this room. I mean, it's, it was just, there's a lot of difference now. I mean, everyone's happier. They see some more, smiling, and just all of a sudden it's like relax, So that's very cool. Every time it's a little different, but this time, all of a sudden I just saw everyone just kind of relax, and that's when I said, that's time.
Thank you, Barb. Anybody have any questions or anything you want to share?
I was feeling energy when you were talking. It was right in my heart center the whole time you were talking, and just being in your presence is amazing. And just been very, also the sound of your
Should we have the microphone?
Yeah, well, that's fine. Let's continue.
Also, the sound of your voice is very healing for me because I listen to my Romero at home a lot.
Yeah.
And I just love the sounds healing. So it's just amazing. And I started out sending my dense energy, and then I ended up in total joy and gratitude.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Is there another question?
There's some positive comments online. A lot of people obviously feeling it very strongly. There was someone whose cat jumped up in their lap, just like Barb. Beyond grateful, intensely emotional, feeling the positives, feeling lighter. So happy to have found you live right now. A lot of good stuff. So, there was a question that came in beforehand. Now, it seems like a better question for the channeling, but I'm going to pose it anyway. And this person's very interested in understanding about heart disease, and any thoughts you have on that. Is heart disease contagious? Is it something that you think will be healing in the fifth dimension? Any comments you have about health issues like that?
Yeah. I forgot, we do collect donations if you guys want to donate, but it's not required, so don't worry about it, but Michaela will pass that around anyway. Just to cover the cost of the room and our various projects, so it's no big deal. Well, first of all, That's a complex question to answer. Michaela may channel something different, but see, each person has access to a certain reality. And as I said earlier, when you go through this energy transfer process, you're not the same person that walked in the room. Now, you may still look the same, and you may still see your life as more or less the same, but as you progress into the days and weeks ahead, your new vibrational essence is going to create and attract a different reality. So if a person right now, let's say, has heart disease or cancer or whatever, that is based on the resonance of their energy field, because your vibration at any given point draws to you a certain kind of an experience. So this is why a lot of people break up relationships when they go through this process, or a lot of people have radical healing experiences when they go through this process, because when your energy field changes, then you're no longer drawing in the same information. Think of it this way. In this room that we're physically sitting in right now, and those of you online, you're all sitting in different spaces. In that space that you're in, there's all kinds of information that you don't see. Now, in our situation here, there are cellular phone towers transmitting information to our mobile phones. There are satellite TV transmissions that are happening in this space. There's all kinds of transmissions that are coming, not to mention each one of you is thinking thoughts, and that your thought patterns are in this space. All of you have energy fields, and your energy fields are permeating this space. So everybody in this room is being influenced by all kinds of information that's present in this space. Not to mention what you ate for lunch has information in it. And all of that information is existing in this space. But not all of you are perceiving that information. So if somebody calls me on my phone and they dial my number, my phone rings, all of your phones don't ring, because only my phone is tuned to that very narrow band of information that exists in this space. But all of your information is existing in this space, not just mine. Now, what makes my phone ring and not all of yours is because this particular phone is tuned to that very narrow band of information. So it can interpret that information in this space and turn it into something useful for me. But it doesn't change the fact that all of that information exists in this space. Everybody's phone information exists in this space. If somebody's texting one of you right now, that information is existing in this space. It's affecting all of us, but all of us don't perceive it. Only one of your telephones does. So in the same way, all human experience that has ever happened is existing in this space. Every thought that has ever been thought, or that ever will be thought, is existing in this space. Now, somebody like Michaela has this ability to channel other dimensional information, so she can tell you what the Pleiadians are saying. Well, that information that the Pleiadians are saying is existing in this space. All of you have access to it. But not all of you have the tuners built in your structures to be able to translate that energy into information like she does. So a person who's an intuitive channel like her has a certain physical structure, and that physical structure, when it receives this energy that's in this space, can translate that energy into a language that can be spoken, and all of you can hear that. But that information was always here. And so it's no different from, well, why do you all physically look different to me? Well, each of you look physically different because you're tuning in slightly different information from the source of all that is. And that slightly different information makes up your physiology, it makes up your human experience, it makes up who you choose to be in relationships with, and so on. So when we make a shift in that energy field, as we've done, you are going to change something. You know, it may not change you physiologically, but it may. But it will certainly change your outer human experience, and it can change your health as well. The reason a person may have heart disease versus another person who may not have heart disease is, well, many different things. One, the information that their body is receiving or tuning in is the information of heart disease, and therefore their body translates that into some physiological response of heart disease or cancer or whatever. So let's take, for example, some people believe that their family has a genetic predisposition to heart disease or cancer or whatever. And yes, to some degree that is true. Certainly in your genes there can be predispositions to things, whether it be heart disease or cancer or any number of illnesses. But not everybody who's in a genetic lineage ends up getting cancer or heart disease just because it's something that happens in their family. And the reason is because, well, you may have two people in a family and maybe everybody in that family gets cancer, but one person doesn't. And the reason is that one person, they may be eating avocados versus hamburgers. And so their body has different information. And it could be that the information in the meat could be creating a certain kind of tendency to express that genetic response. So this is why one person in a family may not get heart disease while everybody else does, because that one person in that family is taking in different information. It may not just be a physical thing that they're ingesting, it could be their vibration is different, their consciousness is different. So individuals of a higher consciousness don't generally suffer from physical illnesses in the same way that other people do. It doesn't mean that you will never have a physical illness. If it's necessary for your growth in some way, you're still going to have that. So there's that. So there's no, heart disease isn't contagious, but not in the physical sense. Vibrationally, sure, you can, if you're around somebody who has heart disease, for example, let's say, a lot of people get cancer and they go to cancer support groups. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. Because you go to a cancer support group, you're going to get cancer, even if you don't have it to begin with. Because all of these individuals in that space are resonating cancer. They're in the consciousness of cancer. They're talking about suffering from cancer. Of course, they're going to perpetuate cancer. If you have cancer or heart disease, the worst thing you can do is join a support group for those things. Instead, go hang out with people who are wanting to live to 200 years. People who are trying to optimize their health, people who are biohackers, people who are exercising and doing things to optimize health as opposed to focusing on the illness. Anything you focus on is going to create that reality. So instead, focus on something, solve the problem by focusing on something that by its existence, the original problem cannot exist. A lot of people try to solve problems by solving the problem, by looking at the problem and trying to fix it. You can't fix the problem by looking at the problem. You have to create a reality that by its existence negates the existence of the problem that happened in the first place. So if you have cancer, focus on what do optimally healthy people do. And by creating that reality, well, you can't have cancer and have that at the same time. Both can't coexist. So it's a complex thing. Now, I also want to say, in the world now, we are moving toward a reality where such things won't exist. It's already happening, not only on the multidimensional healing level, because I work with a lot of very talented healers who are actually healing things vibrationally that were not really possible in the not too distant past, or at least those tools weren't available to us. So we are seeing these kind of illnesses being healed on a physiological level using different kind of energy healing modalities. So it's happening there. But on the other hand, it's also happening on the medical level. Even in genetics right now, there are different kind of genetic modalities or medical treatments that are enabling people to rewrite their genes. So if you have heart disease or cancer, they can rewrite that gene. It's in the experimental stages right now, but in our lifetimes, if you're going to be around for another 10 or 20 years, that's going to be a reality in our society where people are not going to have degenerative health diseases anymore. You can simply just switch off that gene or switch off that tendency and it'll turn off the illness. So that is very much a reality. But there are also many nutritional supplements and all kinds of things now that are also available now today that are enabling us to extend life and to reverse serious health issues. But even something like, as I said earlier, when you eat something, it contains information. And this is why some people will have cancer and they'll switch to a raw food, live food diet, and the cancer will go away. Well, it's because they changed the information that the body is taking in from whatever it was consuming before. And that new information will tune the body to a different, it'll turn the body into a different tuner for energy into their physical body. So their body can no longer carry the same illness that it had before. So there's no reason for anybody to have any kind of an illness. And nothing is contagious that you can't overcome. And certainly as you become more higher vibrational beings, you're going to be more resistant to illness anyway, because most physiological illnesses are third dimensional in nature. As we become higher consciousness, higher vibrating individuals, although we're not going to switch to a fifth dimensional reality in the world tomorrow, we can still function in that reality within our vibrations though. So even though the world may not be fifth dimensional, many of you are functioning from there right now. And a fifth dimensional or a higher dimensional being is not subject to the same rules as a third dimensional being is. So more and more people are going to have fewer and fewer health problems going forward. So I don't see that as a problem, but you know, it's something that can be addressed from many different standpoints. And if you have heart disease now, there's no reason for you to have it. There are many solutions for this and that are available to you today, and certainly many more that will be available in the next couple of decades.
The children that are coming in today, in the millennials, do they have different codes, and are they bringing more light into the world? It seems like that they're more conscious of kindness and forgiveness and things like that. So it seems like they're here to bring in a newer awareness to humanity.
Yeah, well, I mean, Michaela's better at channeling about codes, but what I can tell you is what I'm observing with the children, because we work with kids in our various programs. Well, the younger children are, you know, the very young children are very, very gifted, and they're coming in that way. And they, many of them are telepathic. A lot of parents are telling us about their kids who are highly telepathic, who they can't, you know, they have a hard time with these children because, well, their children read their minds all the time. So they can't, they can't hide anything from them. They can't have negative thoughts. They can't have negative emotions because their kids read their minds. So we are seeing that more and more often in very, very young kids. And a lot of young kids, even kids that are kids camp, are telekinetic, many of them. So younger kids are having these capabilities when they're coming into the world now. Now, part of that is because the world is of a higher consciousness now, but also part of it is, as a society, we're better able to nurture those kids. Programs like ours didn't exist 20 years ago. So kids coming into the world now are being supported. Barb's kind of an anomaly because she's been seeing auras since she was a child, and she actually retained that ability, where most kids can see auras, but they forget, or they lose the ability because our parents think we're just, you know, drawing colors on things, and so we lose those abilities. So part of it is society's getting more ready for that, for children like that, and part of it is children are coming into the world with more natural abilities. Now, those are the young kids. Now, when we get into the older age groups like millennials, slightly different. Yes, a lot of millennials are very aware, but they don't know it. A lot of millennials, many, especially those of us who are older, there's this perception that millennials are kind of lazy and they're not really amounting to anything and they're just playing video games and whatever, right? And well, that may be true, but it is, millennials to some extent, they don't know their place in the world yet. The reason they're kind of stuck in between because they've come into this world and they don't really like this world. You know, young kids, they don't have to deal with that yet, but the millennials, to some extent, they're in this world and they don't really like the government, they don't really like the way society is structured, but they feel kind of powerless to do anything about it at this point. So that's why many of them seem very tuned out. It's not because they're not aware, they want a better world, they just don't know how to bring it about, and they feel a little bit powerless to do anything about it. So they find many means of escaping reality in order to sort of forget the fact that they're living in a world where things aren't the way that they want it to be. But that having been said, it's the millennials that are actually causing a lot of the positive changes in the world that most people don't even know exist. For example, the whole move toward this alternative currency, it's primarily the millennials that are behind all of that. They're the ones who are the hackers and the developers who created that whole system. They're the ones who are primarily have moved the whole cryptocurrency movement to where it's actually become an international phenomenon now. If it was up to those of us who are older, it would never have gotten off the ground. It would never have even been created. So, we have to be careful about, because every generation has a purpose here and has a place here and has a role here. And if we judge them from our own perspective of how we lived our lives, we may miss what's really happening underneath the surface of that. Because our whole economic system is about to go through a very radical shift, and to a great extent, they're the ones responsible for it. And yeah, a lot of them are video gamers and hackers, and well, that's what created that whole movement. So they are all playing their own roles in unique ways, and in the background in many cases. But it's going to be over the next 25 years that we'll really see those things that have been happening beneath the surface coming out into the forefront of society. And we'll create a lot of positive changes in the world. Now, in terms of people who are really stepping out into the world and living to their spiritual potential and manifesting gifts and actually being out there doing the work, I do see that more in older generations, though. I'm not seeing it in the millennials. I'm not seeing it. I mean, the kids are still kids. They're still very young. And some of them are very enlightened and very gifted in their own ways. But they're still getting started. I'm not seeing the millennials or even so much the 30-year-old generation that are stepping out and doing things like Barb and Michaela are doing. It's actually people in this age group, People who are 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on are the ones who are stepping out and becoming leaders in this whole spiritual movement. It is the older ones. So every generation has a different part to play and has a different role and is carrying a different torch. So as a collective, we're moving forward in a direction, but we all possess different abilities. Millennials are very technology focused because, well, they grew up with all of this stuff. I mean, most of us, we were using payphones back in the day, right? Try to find a payphone now anywhere. But they grew up with smartphones and technology and computers, and so they created this alternative financial system that we did not have the ability or knowledge to be able to do. But that is as much an important part of the future that we're heading into, where a future where people will be empowered, as is the people like Michaela and Barb who are out there being spiritual teachers in this movement. So everybody is playing their role in their own unique way. Does that answer the question? Mm-hmm.
We have a comment and a question. Mm-hmm. We would love a workshop from Ethann on future trends in health, government, and monetary systems, societal changes.
Well, I'm sort of doing
Put that
something
on your
similar.
bucket list.
Yeah. At the expo, yeah.
Yeah.
This year's expo, I'll be talking about those kind of things.
Right. Okay. So cryptocurrencies seem to be more vulnerable to corruption. How can we use them if most of us don't even understand them, and in that they are used mostly as speculative?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me back up and say, from a planetary standpoint, the planet Uranus or however you want to pronounce it, is entered Taurus last year. First time since the 1930s, so it's a very slow-moving planet. Taurus is, among other things, a sign that represents money and our value system. It's going to be there till about 2026 or so. So we have entered this period of time between now and 2026 when our financial system is going to go through a major revolution. That's why cryptocurrencies exist right now. is because that's going to happen. So in that time period, we're going to see a lot of major banks collapse. So the existing system will either have to evolve, or if it, then some will evolve, some banks will evolve, and others will go under as a result of this. But out of the undercurrent of that is the whole cryptocurrency movement will become part of the forefront of society. Now, cryptocurrency started as a crazy idea in 2009, so it's still very new. But in that period of time, it has become a major international currency. I think Bitcoin is an example. It is the 8th largest currency in the world right now. So that's a big accomplishment in 9 years for a currency that no government started. Now, corruption in the cryptocurrency movement, well, there's corruption in anything. I mean, you can use a hammer to hammer a nail or beat somebody over the head with it. So corruption is not a factor of any particular thing. It's a factor of the vibration of the collective consciousness. So at any given time, you can use something for positive or you can use it for negative use. It's just up to the collective and the vibration of the consciousness of the person, not necessarily the particular thing. So, but we are seeing that because the whole collective consciousness is not yet at a sufficient consciousness to be able to use these tools in the most optimal way. So yes, there's corruption in cryptocurrency, just like there's corruption in government, just like there's corruption in anything. But it's not a factor of the cryptocurrency, it's a factor of the collective consciousness. Now, that having been said, because of that, yeah, there are about 2,000 or so cryptocurrencies right now, and they all are different, or I mean, some of them are trying to be like each other, but they're all unique in some way, and some of them are total scams and very corrupt, and people can lose money on them, and if you invest in them, you probably are going to lose everything. So if you don't know what you're doing, don't invest in cryptocurrency. You have to study the space, and if you're not particularly technologically minded to be able to understand these things, then you may find it difficult to comprehend and understand that space, which is why millennials are pioneering it, because they grew up in that world. That having been said, though, there are a lot of really great cryptocurrencies. Not a lot. I mean, I should say maybe 3%, I would say, of the whole of all 2,000 cryptocurrencies are worthwhile, that may still be around in 10 years and may actually be worth more than they are now. Now, you can't really go wrong with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the main cryptocurrency. It's the first one, and it's very strong. It has a huge network, and it is decentralized, meaning Bitcoin is not controlled by anybody, technically. No government owns it, no government controls it, there's no corporation behind it. It's simply a mathematical algorithm that functions on the internet and in space. There's a Bitcoin satellite now too. So even if the whole internet crashed, you could still exchange Bitcoin because there's a satellite out there that's transmitting the information. Bitcoin is governed by the people. You can go buy yourself a Bitcoin node. It's just a little device. You can plug it into your internet at home, and it will download the whole Bitcoin blockchain internationally. And if everybody else in the world went down and the government confiscated everybody else's node and yours still existed, it could still repopulate the whole network. So it's not possible for a government to shut it down anymore. It's not possible for any individual or corporation to turn it off. It's too late for that, because there are too many people in the world who are managing the Bitcoin network at this point. Not all cryptocurrencies have that level of robustness at this point, so that doesn't necessarily apply to all of them. Some are very centralized, meaning there is a central authority or company that's managing the cryptocurrency, so if all of the people in the company got thrown in jail, the cryptocurrency will go under too. But more and more of them are becoming decentralized, meaning there's no authority behind them. Bitcoin is already that. But the point is, as we move into this new age of Uranus and Taurus, and then Pluto and Aquarius in 2022 and beyond, more and more of these cryptocurrencies are going to become decentralized, because that is the nature of that type of astrological movement, is that we're moving toward a decentralized society where the currency system, the economic system, businesses, and all of these things will become decentralized. Decentralized meaning there's no leader or corporate system or authority making decisions on behalf of the thing that you're interacting with. So yeah, if you don't know what you're doing, I would be careful about getting into the crypto space. But with Bitcoin, you're generally pretty safe, because it is technically, well, there are some that are sort of decentralized, but it is the only fully decentralized cryptocurrency out there. No government can raid the Bitcoin office and make them shut it down, because there is no Bitcoin office. There is no Bitcoin person. There is nobody who controls the network. So there's no way to turn it off anymore, unless the whole entire world and the satellite out in space completely goes dark, and there is no internet or no phones, because you can transmit Bitcoin by phone now too. So you can't. So if everything goes and we're back to the Stone Age, then yeah, there's no Bitcoin. But otherwise, it's here to stay, and it's not anything we need to worry about. And it is gradually replacing the system. A lot of other countries, like Venezuela, for example, they've had hyperinflation in the recent years, to where it takes a bag of cash like this big to buy a loaf of bread, because their currency is worth so little now. But the people there have turned to cryptocurrency, whereas in the United States it's not that popular yet, because we don't have to yet. Most people don't notice how inflated our currency is yet. Whereas in Venezuela, it's gone into the thousands of percent, to where people noticed it. And the only way they can cope with it is they're starting to purchase or get paid in cryptocurrencies as a means to continue to survive in their society. We will see that eventually here too. I mean, at some point, I just heard in the news today that the US government is contemplating shutting down in September, because they don't have enough money to keep doing business unless we raise the debt ceiling, which means the country goes into further debt. And so they're begging for more debt in order to continue to finance the government. Well, if you print more money, it inflates the currency, decreases its value. So we are heading into a hyperinflation period. It may not be in the next 5 years or the next 20 years, but it's coming at a certain point. And so your dollars are worth less and less all the time, whereas Bitcoin actually goes the opposite direction. It has less supply as time goes on, and as a result, its value goes up. So you have to be careful, but generally with Bitcoin, you're pretty safe at this point. And I think in the future, there'll be a lot more other cryptocurrencies that will be the same. If you do know what you're doing, there are a handful of cryptocurrencies that I think will still be here 10 years from now and will be thriving. And a lot of people who are out in the world today who may not have any major amount of financial means will be the millionaires and billionaires of tomorrow, because they have invested in cryptocurrency and knew what they were doing. So it's a really great time to be alive. Everything is going to change in your lifetimes in such a dramatic way that you can't imagine right now. And we're just seeing the early trickling of that movement at this time. So I think we're out of time, yeah? Or yeah, okay. All right, great. Well, thank you all for joining today and for participating. We appreciate all of you, especially those of you who are online as well. And we do these events here about once a month, although I don't think we're doing one in August since we were at the Expo. But join us there if you can, August 9th, 10th, and 11th. And we'll be doing energy transfers all weekend and a lot of other amazing stuff. And we'll see you all next time.